Welcome. This is Sabrina Monarch bringing you the astrology forecast for October 7th to October 13, 2020. Mercury will station retrograde in Scorpio at the end of the week, and we are in the heart of Mars retrograde. So if you look out at the night sky, you will see a very bright red Mars. And this is because the sun or the Earth is situated right between the Sun and Mars. There's an opposition between the Sun and Mars this week, which marks the midpoint of the Mars retrograde cycle. And so I'll be talking with you in this episode, we can call it, of this ceremony that is happening with this Mars retrograde that we are in the midst of. And if you've been following me and reading or listening, because these are written forecasts at monarchastrology.com, and I recently branched out to YouTube to create written versions. So however you're following, we've been talking about Mars retrograde for some time and the potency of this transit and the spiritual opportunities of this transit. So let's just get into it. I'm going to pull up my slides. And while you're here, do like this video. Please comment, let me know what you think, what resonates with you, and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to receive updates of when I put out new videos. Perhaps you've noticed the visibility of Mars in the night sky in the last month. If you have clear skies, it's hard not to notice this bright red planet. During Mars retrogrades, Mars gets as far as being directly opposed to the Sun from Earth's perspective. So some of the inner planets like Mercury, Venus will never do that. They don't get that far away from the Sun, but Mars does. And so this opposition between the Sun and Mars gives Mars a bright appearance in the sky, similar to how we have the full luminosity of the moon during the full moon, when the sun and moon are on opposite sides of the Earth. Many of us have observed full moons and the lunar cycles enough and even participated with them or done ritual with them to have a sense of what a full moon is like. We feel the extra emotional charge in the air, perhaps. And with Mars opposing the sun, it is similar energetically. It's a fullness, but it's Martian themes that are ripening, just like on a full moon, it's lunar themes. So it's our emotions, it's the moon tinted through, whatever sign it's in. And Mars only retrogrades around every 2 years. So the prospect of understanding Mars retrogrades over time is a longer time span of commitment for tracking this. But here we are. So if you're listening to this, presence yourself with it being a Mars retrograde season. And for reference, the last 2 Mars retrogrades took place April 17th to June 29th, 2016, and June 26th to August 27th of 2018. So think about, your spring, summertime of 2016 and 2018. And if there's a similar or even like a development of the storyline that you're feeling now at this point in your life around Martian themes. So these are things around our personal will, our desires, our impulses. It is also our relationship with the masculine. So that could be internally, that could be with masculine people. It is also, how do you define masculine? Like that would all be up for Mars retrograde. And the astrological transits permeate every layer of life. I love them. They're psychedelic, essentially. It's all encompassing. When you speak the language of the stars, the sky speaks to you. That's what Dane Rudhyar, an astrological great, says, and it's very true. When you are aware of what's happening, you can see it play out everywhere. From mundane and observable events to deep movements in the psyche and soul, to dreams and spiritual revelations. And if you read me or watch these videos often, you know that I like to discuss the movements of psyche and the spiritual opportunities of the transits the most, while I also acknowledge the kinds of energies and events we might be directly experiencing and connect them to that context of what might be the greater purpose or the opportunities of the moment. With Mars retrograde at a literal level, we can be experiencing more conflict in our lives and more awareness of conflict. People might be on edge more than usual. We might ourselves be on edge. And maybe certain disagreements or things that weren't working out that were brewing below the surface are now coming up, that there's an impasse that can no longer be ignored. There's a heightened frequency of confrontation in the air. So all of these things, all of this intensification of conflict can be happening interpersonally, and it can also be interior, like wrestling with yourself over warring impulses or desires. And as tracking the movement of the celestial bodies and understanding what themes may arise can enhance presence with life, Mars retrograde can be a really meaningful time to deepen our awareness of how we relate to conflict. How do we pick our battles? How do we contemplate the implications of anger and discontent, what it might say about what we do stand for and what we do really desire? And on a recent episode of Kira Taborn, my friend, the Astrology show, which I love this episode, this podcast, and this episode in particular about Mars just shook me. Kira's going through all the planets in this podcast, and these conversations have been so inspiring and have given me so many new perspectives. And in this one, all about Mars, Drew Levanti mentioned the spiritual element of conflict, and I've been thinking about that ever since. Where did it go? Here it is. Okay, so I wrote him to ask him, like, what did you say on the podcast? And basically asked him for a quote. So this isn't a direct quote from the podcast episode, though I do recommend listening to the Mars episode of the Astrology podcast. But Drew offered me a quote graciously for this forecast because I wanted to reference his thoughts on the spiritual potential of conflict. So he said, conflict is the way to move past situations that aren't for me. If I'm in a situation not aligned with my purpose or mission in life, then I need to embrace saying no to it, however uncomfortable that may be. Conflict is a bitter remedy for being in the wrong place. Through conflict, I create the friction that propels me toward where I am meant to be. Conflict is full of the spirit's song. Where are you being called to go? So I am not someone who chases conflict for the thrill of the drama. I tend more toward peaceable energy in terms of my preferences. However, I do deeply and increasingly respect the way that drama is already inherent to life, that conflict is already part of life. And how do we address it? How do we work with it? How do we pick our battles, like I was saying, when it comes to conflict that's in the air and that it is emerging naturally in our experience? Conflict is definitely like a plot point, or makes up the plot points of the drama of life. Conflict can reveal true values and desires and can increase the intimacy that we have with ourselves because we've faced ourselves, like we've really confronted what's happening internally instead of brushing it under the surface. Similarly, conflict increases intimacy in our connections because we can be more honest with each other. We can work through the schisms or the disagreements that occur. My hope for you this season is that when you feel the fire of Mars, that sense of impulsive desire or impatience or irritation or urgency or frustration or anger, that it can be a point, an opening for awakening. So welcome back. In case this is your first time here, I am a soul-centered astrologer, studied in evolutionary astrology, and I love providing perspectives on the opportunities of the transits and putting words to the current zeitgeist to help guide you on your path. And if you'd like to receive these weekly forecasts straight to your inbox, my mailing list is a great place to be on. It's also where I'll send you updates about study opportunities with me and when my books open and things like that. So the link will be in the description below. So I have a few announcements before getting into our week in more detail. One is that my Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is now open for enrollment for a January to April 2021 term. I made the schedule on this one friendlier to European time zones, so I'd love to have those of you on that side of the world join. All of the classes are recorded. There's a combination of pre-recorded content with a ton of lecture material, helping you deepen your relationship with all of the archetypes. And then there's also a live call component of meeting weekly to get to know each other and to talk about these themes and to build community around it. And at the end of the class, we read our own charts. This class has been a deeply transformative experience for many people who have come through it. You can find more about this class, what we cover, and read testimonials on the course page, which I'm also linking. And enrollment is now open, so feel free to enroll. And you can also email me, sabrina@monarchastrology.com, if you have any questions. And also, I am developing a level 2 training for alumni. I've been running this Evolutionary Astrology Intensive since 2017. So I want to offer something new for those of you who have run through this course. And as someone who practices evolutionary astrology every day, whether or not I'm at work, reading charts or creating content, it's a filter that I see the world through, and it helps guide me. And it's a way of life to me, living astrologically. So I want to create a community, to a small, intimate container for a level 2 training to deepen our skills in delineation and chart reading and consulting, and also continue to work through our own blocks. It's evolutionary astrology, which means that as we evolve, or as we overcome our own deeper issues and conflicts in life, that becomes this inner wealth that really comes through as a transmission in how we show up for work, how we show up for other people, how we show up in our lives. So I'm really excited to be offering this. It's going to be in the winter time, and I'll be sharing more details as the time gets closer. Also, my astrology reading bookings are currently full. I will announce when my books open again to my mailing list. You'll be the first to know if you're on the list. And I am still taking new clients for ongoing mentorship and coaching, a 6-month or 1-year commitment. I've been really focused on this. I love working with you over time and really unfolding the natal chart in process. So if you're interested in working with me in that capacity, send me an email at sabrina@monarchastrology.com to set up a free consultation call. And we have a few more announcements. No new episode of Magic of the Spheres podcast this week. We do have over 70 episodes, though, of conversations about personal evolution and spiritual lifestyle, some of them about astrology, some of them not. So it's binge-worthy. And also this week in particular in the forecast, I mentioned a lot of different resources, videos, podcasts kind of thing. So there's plenty of stuff to explore. But go ahead and tune into this podcast if you haven't yet. I always like to tell you about it, even if there's not a new episode, just in case you're new here and didn't know about this podcast. I get a lot of messages about how much people are enjoying it. So don't wait to tune in. It's juicy. It's ready. And then I'm offering something that I've done group visualizations before, but maybe once or twice. So I'm really excited. This came through to me. It's a community meditation for healing deprivation and scarcity and reconnecting to receptivity and abundance. I have a visualization practice. I visualize pretty much every day. And I feel like I got a transmission of a visualization practice to share with others, to share in community. And it came out of my own mean, studies of astrology and really thinking about Taurus and receptivity for years now, and having these metaphors of what is receptivity and how do you cultivate receptivity in the imagination. I've been thinking about that for years. And just in the last few months, I've really been tuning into some research about beauty and fashion and neurochemistry. And all of these things swirled in my head and created this particular visualization that I'm timing with the transit of Venus in Virgo and trining Uranus and Taurus this week. So we'll get into that in the forecast, but I wanted to mark that moment in time with a visualization practice directly connected with these archetypes, and I'll explain more of why that is. But essentially, when we look at Venus, Venus is about beauty and abundance and feeling the pleasures of life. And a negative experience with Venus or having a challenging Venusian experience doesn't matter what you have in your natal chart. Anyone in any natal chart can have a completely, multivalent relationship with Venus and with feeling abundant. This is something that we tune into spiritually, that we tune into psychologically. And the natal chart is a profound gateway to those meditations. But I just want to emphasize that this is really universal, that we can feel the lusciousness of having this positive relationship with joy and pleasure and beauty. Or we can feel this sense of deprivation and scarcity, and that hurts. It's not just an emotional experience, but it's a chemical, it's like a brain chemistry pattern. And so, in addition to some things I've researched on that and visualizations I've played with for years, but then more specifically in this one that came to me recently, I wanted to share these ideas and share a visualization practice in community. So it's free. You can sign up through a link that I'm going to be leaving below. You'll join my mailing list. You can unsubscribe at any time, but of course, it's great being on the mailing list because I send you all the forecasts and whatnot. So I'd love to see you there. It's going to be a live event on Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific. All right, now we're ready to get into the forecast. So on October 7th, 2020, in case you forgot what year it is, no one will ever forget 2020, Mercury in 9 degrees of Scorpio will be opposite Uranus retrograde in 9 degrees of Taurus at 1:55 p.m. Pacific. The places in life where we seem to always be wanting more, so more love, more wealth, more enjoyment, more sugar, whatever it is, like more sweetness. These can often be connected to places of shutdown or numbness, where because of these blocks, we crave more intense sensations to feel that gratification or that aliveness. Now, this is not to judge the desire or the enjoyment of high intensity sensation, which does have its magic. High intensity can really stir us in deep ways, and it can create experiences that are provocative and cathartic. So, who's to say that you just want to have like a mellow existence all the time? But that feeling when you're wanting more, but it's not because you don't already have enough, it's that you don't feel what you already have. So this can be a cue that not only is more being desired, but also less. What is in the way of fully receiving what the present moment has to offer? I mean, this can even be like, I don't eat cane sugar. Every now and then, something I eat has cane sugar in it, but I've really eliminated it from my diet because I was having, it's an addictive thing, cane sugar. I was feeling really out of touch with my own hunger cues because sugar spikes your blood sugar, and creates this whole chemical response. So I was feeling distorted with this relationship with sugar. So if you cut out sugar, then fruit or other sweet things that are naturally sweet begin to taste more complex or more sweet in comparison because you're not feeling overloaded with cane sugar. So that's just one example. There's many different forms of like having an addictive relationship to something that's high intensity or always needing more, wanting to grab, wanting to get, when it's just that there's already too much of something that's kind of blocking a natural sensitivity. So the Taurus-Scorpio axis is like a lush garden with vibrant flowers and fruits and rich, dark soil that is made of death, like literally made of dead things. Both Taurus and Scorpio as energies, they like to hang on. They're fixed signs. People use the word stubborn. There is a stubborn quality, there's an enduring quality, and things can endure for better or worse. We can get attached to material things and what, symbolizes security to us. We can also be slow to let things go when it is their time, prolonging the inevitable as long as possible. When we feel stuck, it is often a signal that we are refusing to let go of something that needs to be composted, to become part of that rich soil that makes way for new life, and that we are not truly opening ourselves to receive what life is already offering us. So, a little bit of both of not letting go of something and not receiving what's already there, what's being offered to us in life. So, in lack of receptivity, we can still desire and crave. I mean, definitely going to be craving. But we feel that we have to throw so much at ourselves and so hard to feel the smallest gratification. So, receptivity is such a mystery. Um, Literally have been thinking about it, reflecting on it, meditating on it for years, and it continually deepens and illuminates things for me and surprises me, and it's magic, receptivity. So try simply tuning into what it feels like to be closed off versus what it feels like to be receptive, because you probably already know the difference, but just tune into it intuitively as an energy, closed off versus receptive. Cultivating receptivity often confronts us with our fears and our trust issues. Like, oh, this is so good. Now I have to be scared. What if I lose it? Or what if I feel things that are so deep that I'm afraid to feel? Easier to be closed off, right? Receptivity isn't faint or passive, it's very powerful. And like dark, fertile soil, receptivity can be a dark, feminine mystery. And by dark, I mean the sensation of night. Like go outside at night and feel that. The sensation of closed eyes, feel that too. The sensation of feeling one's way through the darkness, the womb. And then on October 9th, Mars retrograde in 22 degrees of Aries will square Pluto in 22 degrees of Capricorn at 6:10 a.m. Pacific. And this is our second of 3 exact Mars-Pluto squares, the next one coming when Mars is direct again. So the 3 Mars-Pluto exact dates are August 13th, October 9th, and December 23rd, 2020. So I feel inspired by my friend Arakai of Star Siren Astrology's Mars retrograde video. I watched this and was just like, wow, I love how she embodies and was depicting this energy. And I love Arakai, she's amazing. But this isn't a direct quote, but what I was getting from watching this video that really stuck with me was this transmission of how egoic Mars and Aries is. This like, I'm going to eat this now. I want to fuck now. I want to meet you. I don't know you, but I like you. I'm going to go up and talk to you. I'm going to follow this impulse now. I'm going to know what I want and go for it. And how, yes, egoic that is, and also this instinctual part of our lives. And how are we relating with our instincts? But I recommend watching the video because Arakai is amazing. Pluto is said to be the higher octave of Mars. So Mars represents the impulse. Mars also has this severing, slicing, separating quality to it. Decision has incision seeded into it. So when we make a choice, it's this very slicing through reality quality. And we have to make choices in life. If we don't make choices, there's consequences of that. So conflict feels kind of inherent to Mars in some sense of what choice am I going to take, and the way that we are kind of required by life to participate, or things that we don't want happen instead. There is a way to harmonize and go with the flow and whatnot, but even that is a choice if you look at it that way. So the personal will can bushwhack through this matrix of how life would happen without our say. If we're just super passive and don't do anything, imagine that reality versus when you actually step up and make choices, you're like bushwhacking through reality. It's the image that comes to mind. And depending, the personal will can be noble or it can be destructive or anywhere in between. Knowing correct action involves some layer of egoic engagement. What do I want? What is running through me? Not just doing what we think is people pleasing in a moment, but asking, how do I feel in my body? What do I actually desire? And including that in the decision. This is unless we seek to be martyrs and take ourselves completely out of the equation. So there is an inherent challenge in the Martian archetype of how to act, of how to align with the impulses. And I was saying that Mars and Pluto are octaves of each other. So what about Pluto? Pluto is then this deeper layer of this, the soul and the soul's impulses or even compulsions, how the soul is compelled or impelled. In the sign of Capricorn, Pluto relates to these contradicting desires to keep it together, so to not lose control, to be proper, to fit into society, to not break the personal and social status quo. And you know how intense that is, like trying to keep it together when you're going like you're losing it on the inside. Like it's intense to try to like box that in and be normal. And there's also a lot of pressure to do that. There's a lot of pressure in the world to conform, and there's many different types of conformity. Not everything in life is super easy to opt out of when it comes to conformity. So there's a way that there is this compulsion to align and fit in, and be part of society. And there's also a quality that, being part of society continually offers us moral impasses or moral opportunities, because there is a lot of unjust energy in society. There's a lot of unjust ways that society is organized. So doing very simple things like driving and filling up our car at a gas station is one example I like to use for Pluto and Capricorn. It's connected to a whole system that we don't, necessarily want to be a part of, and yet we are. You could go live off the grid, but maybe you're not prepared to make that level of sacrifice. So Pluto and Capricorn has that quality of really digesting, what is society? What am I a part of? What have I opted into? And finding out how to be in that process. Because society evolves not just as this, blob of a bunch of people moving toward a direction. It's also each individual, every person's moral awakening, every person's spiritual awakening, every person working through their shadow material instead of projecting it. So it's like we're bonded with social problems. We live them out. They live inside of us at such a deep level. And shadow work is not just personal, it's collective for that reason. And so then there is this other side of Pluto and Capricorn, which is the desire to dismantle, to tear down, to break something down, to crack something. And there's a lot of different arenas that can play out. It can be a collective theme. It can also be a personal theme of where do you carry rigidity? Where are you so rigid that you don't bend, you would simply break? It might be terrifying to imagine breaking in those places, or you might be drawn to it, allured towards it. You might, want to have a cathartic experience where you let go of some part of your ego and let it crack off you like an eggshell and you're ready to be born out of it. There's a lot of different ways that we can be interacting with that archetype. So together, you put this impulsive, I want to do this now energy of Mars and Aries to this deep Pluto and Capricorn signature and the deep history and the deep bones. You put them together at a 90-degree angle. And there's a massive tension here. We might find ourselves wanting something that goes against our personal grain, as though our soul is seeking catharsis and wants to break through limiting or outdated structures. We might find a connection between desire and depression. Perhaps that confronting what we really want sparks a kind of sobriety because it makes us think about our lives more deeply, makes us think about the compromises that we're making or the ways that we're not showing up for ourselves. Perhaps if we see that we're not being honest or willing about our desires, that could be depressing. I think a lot of Mars retrogrades is opportunities for the development of courage. Mars ultimately, and I picked this up from reading the book, it's like The Enlightened Warrior. And I was really moved by this idea in it that warriorship is ultimately about facing oneself and not being afraid of oneself. So imagine all the shadow material, all the desires, all the shame, whatever it is, and that desire to just kind of like clamp it down, not look at it, like do life normally, versus to like look at that, to be annihilated by that material, to be, transformed, the allurement and the fear of that. And it's something I think that is best undergone often. There's a degree to which having like a sense of solid self and feeling boundaried and structured is can support you in life, but also being able to reassess or challenge one's premises or have deeper changes often so that it's not like several decades go by and you're like, oh, fuck, that was all a lie because I was too scared to face myself. Like, no one wants that. And I think that this Mars Pluto square has that kind of tension of those immediate impulses, that immediate knowing of this is what I want, and the Pluto and Capricorn with the deeper kind of hesitation or wanting to go very slowly, or understanding the massive implications of maybe these little changes that we want to make. So, very edgy transit. It's a good time to be compassionate with yourself and other people as well. And then October 10th, 2020, Venus in 9 degrees of Virgo will trine Uranus retrograde in 9 degrees of Taurus at 4:08 p.m. Pacific. And this is the transit that I am aligning this community visualization meditation on moving away from scarcity and deprivation and into abundance and receptivity. I'm timing it with this transit because it felt like the one. So what I wrote for this transit is be mindful that when we start fixating on what isn't good enough about ourselves, about other people, about life, we tap into a scarcity and deprivation frequency. There's not enough. I'm not enough. You're not enough. Like that energy, right? It's not just perception, it's a whole frequency. It's like a string of a string instrument and you just pluck at it and it reverberates, to all the other moments in life that you've felt scarcity. And it's kind of a traumatic frequency. Some of the research that I was doing about rewiring the brain, brought this up. So, all those little moments of disappointment or not feeling like things are enough, it is like a traumatic part of the mind. And with practice and conscientiousness, we can train our minds to more readily reroute and focus on abundance and feeling loved. And this is not to ignore or bypass or deny these other feelings, but to learn how to not get stuck in those neural pathways and be in a personal hell over it, right? So a few weeks ago, channeled a meditation on this very topic and felt like I was going to share it because it just had that kind of Uranian like electricity to me, and it felt more transpersonal. I think meditation is definitely a route to the transpersonal, but anyway, I channeled it. I wanted to share it, so I'm going to be talking about that on a live call with whoever would like to attend. So the link for that is again in the description. And then on October 11th, the sun in 18 degrees of Libra will square Jupiter in 18 degrees of Capricorn at 6:34 a.m. Pacific. And Mars retrograde in Aries is close enough in orb to make it a T-square too. So you have the sun and Mars opposite each other and they're both square Jupiter and Capricorn. What I share with you every week is like what transits are exact, but there's still the orbs to consider. It's easier to organize these forecasts based on what's exact. But if you have a practice of looking at charts and just like looking at the daily chart, you'll see, what planets are in aspect, if you know how to read aspects. And if you don't, you should come study astrology with me. But yeah, if you look at charts, you'll see the rhythms. It's not just like these clockwork, like things are just happening at these certain moments. There's like waves of transits kind of increasing and decreasing in intensity. So all that to say, there is a T-square between the sun and Mars and Jupiter right now. And here's my thoughts on it. It may be relevant at the moment to actively make peace with our past. So sun in Libra, peace. Jupiter in Capricorn, the past, the growing awareness of regret and dismay at how things have gone. Mars, our willingness to face that. So regrets and grudges may surface, and with time and experience passing, new layers of process, where we haven't forgiven, where we haven't let go, where we haven't accepted fully. Until that is full, until it's complete, we're going to get these new layers. And it's not even necessarily about arriving, because we can be surprised at how many layers these things have and how infinite they are. But sometimes, when it's coming up, there can be breakthroughs in how we're working with this material. And Jupiter in Capricorn just has that kind of gritty vibe to it. So square sun in Libra, it seems like, okay, making peace with this gritty material. And my teacher, Lucia Anais Satyagraha, this is a podcast episode we did together a while ago that I love so much. And she has particularly really expanded for me the concept of the Ho'oponopono prayer, the I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you prayer. And what she's taught me is that it can expand, you can go into more detail, like actually extrapolate. What are you sorry about? What do you want to be forgiven for? What are you thankful for? And what do you love about this person? Powerful. When you actually go into that process, it can inspire a lot of movement and tears and whatnot. And this can be done with the other person present and be a reciprocal activity. or it can be done in meditation, such as if the other person is passed or you're just not in contact with them for whatever reason. So something to think about. Um, Part of also like I love working with people. Um, I see people for assistance and for coaching, and I also coach. It's important for me to be kind of in that circuit, to have a team, to be on people's teams. And part of it is that sometimes when you work with people, like they can really help you hold a container, um, and give you tools for things that you can do by yourself. But I find that forgiveness and grudges are, they're so deep. We can do a lot internally to forgive or to let go, but sometimes it's a supportive space held professionally or with a friend or in community that really allows us to let go and to grieve. And I think that that's even very natural to humans being social animals, and just how much we need to grieve with each other and in community, and to have like ceremonial space for it. So find where you have opportunities to do this inner work of forgiveness, but also if um, there's someone or something that is a container for that for you as well. And then on October 12th, Jupiter in 18 degrees of Capricorn will sextile Neptune retrograde in 18 degrees of Pisces at 12:07 a.m. Pacific. And these planets have formed this alignment recently. So they're doing it again. I forgot to check the dates for when that was happening exactly, but it's been recent. I'll just say that. And this transit really further emphasizes the restorative and healing potentials of forgiveness and peacemaking. So we just talked about it through the context of Sun and Libra square Jupiter and Capricorn, and Libra peacemaking, Jupiter and Capricorn, the gritty vibe, and like the grief and making peace with that. But Neptune is a transpersonal planet, and it's about ultimate transcendence and love and forgiveness and dissolving and union. And is forgiveness and having like a deep miraculous experience with it, not dissolving of all the crustiness and like all those hard layers over the heart. It's powerful like that. And I think that there's also a resistance because we use our like reticence or our resistance or our tough boundaries and our closed offness to protect ourselves from dissolution, to protect ourselves from being taken advantage of. So it's a really powerful synthesis of these archetypes to find out how to let go of this calcification, these grievances, these grudges, these heavy, dense energies, while also still living in dignity and self-respect and having good boundaries. It's like an art form to find that balance. And some forms of guilt or sorrow, such as for having hurt another or not having appreciated or honored each other, can be spiritually opening to address these when we allow ourselves to work through it rather than repressing it, such as actively doing an apology or forgiveness prayer or practice, shedding the tears, feeling humbled, and feeling the grace of the emotional release. I think that is healing. We also get to witness how time and perspective has granted us a deeper respect for life. It takes respect for life or for love to see that something sacred had not been honored. And maybe we only get to see that in retrospect. And it humbles us to realize that we or others involved were simply doing the best that we could at the time. And now we know more. And that's a very, very bittersweet feeling. But despite the tendency to be distraught by that or to sweep it under the rug or try to suppress it, what does it mean to actually open up to those feelings, have some ceremony about it, and let go. And then on the same day, Venus in 11 degrees of Virgo will sextile Mercury in 11 degrees of Scorpio at 9:39 a.m. Pacific. Some recommended reading. It's on the floor. I'm just going to leave it there. Communication Miracles for Couples by Jonathan Robinson. Communication Miracles for Couples. So whether this supports your current partnership or gives you ideas for how to communicate better with all your relations and with a future significant other, I was just reading through it. I bought it a while ago, but I just was reading through it after cleaning. And I was super inspired by it. And it just seemed really smart and really helpful. And one of those retrospect things of like, wow, if only I knew those communication skills in the past, that could have been cool, but I know them now, you know? So imagine communicating exactly how you feel and what your needs and desires are in a way that created meaningful transformation in your life and deeper connection and intimacy, as opposed to crisis or destruction or some kind of blowout. Good communication. So we're looking at Mercury and Venus coming together. Beautiful alignment for communication. So good communication is a craft, and we learn it when it's modeled or when we research it and practice it. And learning and practicing better communication skills before there is a crisis in our life that demands it is like practicing wellness actively instead of only being interested in wellness when we're experiencing some kind of health crisis. We talk about like preventative wellness. Well, there's good communication, good hygienic communication practices that can create more connection and give us better conflict resolution skills, for example, so that we can create more thriving relationships. Very subtle transit, Venus sextile Mercury, but I wanted to sprinkle that in there because it's a good book. And I think that those of you who, like to do research on personal development or deepening your relationships would enjoy it. And then on October 13th, the Sun in 21 degrees of Libra opposes Mars in 21 degrees of Aries at 4:26 p.m. Pacific. This is the heart of the Mars retrograde, the full moon-esque energy of the Mars retrograde, just as in the Sun is opposite Mars, like during a full moon, the Sun is opposite the moon. So you go outside, look at Mars, and see how bright and red it is. So one of the possibilities of Mars retrograde is reviewing our relationship with the masculine, as well as healing our relationship with the masculine. So I know saying that so many different people in my audience and a lot of you have different perspectives on gender and the binary and the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. So really take this for what it means to you. I really pay attention to multiple discourses about gender, deconstructing gender, and then the whole kind of like conversation about the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine and their dance together. And I like both of the conversations, and I find different like gems from each. But back to this, everything in reality is a relationship. We have a relationship with like the trees that I see outside of my window. Like now that I'm looking at them, it's like I see them, but I could go find them outside and like touch their bark and talk to them and build a relationship with them. And that might change my relationship with feeling grounded, feeling connected to my environment. We have a connection with the internet. A lot of people have grievances about the internet being this soul-sucking place, but I love the internet, and I'm teaching a course right now, Online Presence is Performance Art, all about re-enchanting the internet. So everything, every essence, like we have relationships with everything. So essences, like masculinity, what is the masculine essence? What's your relationship to it? What has been your relationship with masculine identified people? Are there common stories that you have with your father, with male members of your family, with masculine partners that you've had, etc.? Is there a through line? How does masculine essence live inside of you? And how do you relate to it in others and in the world? Mars retrograde is always a beautiful ceremonial time to assess this relationship and potentially, just like when I talk about Venus retrograde, it's like this ceremony around love and receptivity and abundance. And Mars retrograde is like that ceremony around Mars, and Mars is very classically related to the masculine. How that turns into gender stereotypes and whatnot is a whole different story. As the sun in Libra, our sign of balance, reciprocity, grace, and harmony, opposes Mars retrograde in Aries, there is a possibility that we might be literally assessing how we relate to men and masculinity because of this very basic association of Mars. And if it's not so literally gendered, there can still be other polarities or opposites that we are confronting our relatedness with. This can be a unique opening for really seeing into the relationship that exists where there is a conflict, perhaps even when there is a challenger or an enemy. So a specific person, is it about you and that person, or is it about something that that person represents that you're in relationship with? Sometimes it is the relationship itself that needs healing and transformation. And by that, I mean the third thing. So not you, not the other person, the third thing, the union, the third thing that's created by your synergy. I like to picture like a channel of water connecting two entities, connecting two people, and meditating like, is that water clear or is it muddied? Can the waters become clear? And what is your role to play in that reconciliation? We don't need the other person's participation, in the sense that sometimes another person is not willing to do conflict resolution, or maybe that person has passed and you're not communicating with them on the other side, or you don't know how, or whatever. There's reasons, maybe you don't talk to that person, but you can heal and clear your side of the water. And because those waters are connected, I think a lot of people have kind of miracle experiences where they do their own inner healing and they notice that their relationships change, even though they didn't talk to the people involved. And it's beautiful to have conflict resolution face to face and with two willing parties, but it's not always that way. So thinking about how you're connecting, what are you in relationship with, and where do you have agency to create peace, and starting from there. I think it can be really powerful, actually, when we're looking at Mars retrograde, to think about those unresolved conflicts in life where you feel like you need another person to participate, like you need an apology from them, or you need them to do something different. And if you're not getting that, they're not changing their behavior, they're not saying what you want them to say, who are you in that? Like, what is the container that you have around yourself? Like, what's your power? What's your agency in the situation? And then I'm going to close it off with a nice image of skulls. Mercury stations retrograde in 11 degrees of Scorpio at 6:05 p.m. Pacific. And Mercury stations direct again on November 3rd in 25 degrees of Libra, so it is going to retrograde back into the sign of Libra. And Mercury will leave retrograde shadow, which is to pass the degree that it originally stationed retrograde on November 19th. So November 3rd, end of retrograde proper, November 19th, end of retrograde shadow. So for this, if you've been here a while, you know that I don't like the whole hype of Mercury retrograde. Little inconveniences and tech things can occur. They can. But Mercury retrograde is often also a time of sacred messages coming in 3. So Mercury, any planetary retrograde, the planet is going over the same degree of the zodiac 3 times, forward, back, forward again. So there's certain messages, certain themes that tend to knock on your door 3 times, little synchronicities. It's like this little magic trickster part of Mercury retrograde that I like to pay attention to. It also, when we're looking at like Mercury retrograde in a water sign, there may be new processing of our emotions coming up. And that can be challenging. It can also be really healing and really meaningful. And for this retrograde, what came to mind? I was thinking of some of my very Scorpionic friends. And by that, I mean they either have strong Scorpio signature, strong 8th house signature, or strong Pluto, or some combination of all 3. And they have this thing in common where they always like to probe deeper into themselves and into others, like in their relationships. They like intimacy. They like to go deep. But this intimacy is like they have it within them. There's no part of their mind that they won't probe. If something upsets them or triggers them, they're kind of like excited by it, of like, ooh, like, let's explore that. And they're fascinated. They're deeply fascinated. And they've found that by making a practice of this, they tend to become more empowered in their life. So instead of having this like spooky thing in the corner that they're afraid of looking at, they go straight towards it. This is a good look for Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, I'd say. Tune into the opportunities for depth insight when it comes to personal reflection, conversation, and media. So for example, some books, many books contain like workbook components or activities at the end of the chapter where you can do something to take the reading deeper. And notice, do you have resistance to those activities? You look over it and you're just like eye rolling at it. You're like, I don't feel like doing that, or that's not going to be deep. I don't know, maybe it would be. And or is it something that you have resistance doing because you don't want to feel those things, or you don't want to open that can of worms, you don't want to open Pandora's box? So thinking about that possibility of probing. And of course, it's not like this is like the end all be all or answer for everything, but when opportunities come up to take a deeper look at your psyche and your soul, are you resisting it? What are you resisting? And what happens when you go into your resistance? There's often high potency energy in those spaces. And also stagnancy. If there's a place in the psyche that we just won't entertain year after year, it's stagnant energy. So I think that, in having these Scorpionic friends of mine come so brightly to mind, they felt like the delineation, like they're already doing it. And, they're the friends that I can like tell anything to, and they're just like on board with it, can like talk with me about anything. It's cool to be able to hold that much space, not just with other people, but within yourself, of confronting the channels and corridors of your own mind. Another kind of Mercury and Scorpio vibe could be like rabbit holes of research and whatnot, like getting fascinated. And that's like the external side in some sense, though it is an internal experience to feel fascinated by something and want to just keep going into it. But noting where the places that feel spooky to you and where do you feel afraid, are you willing to look at that and digest that material? Mars retrograde season as well, which is all about that kind of thing. So this is what I have for you this week. Thank you for being here. Leave a comment. Let me know what resonated with you and how you're doing. I would love to hear about it. Like this video, please share it, and I'll see you next time.